Good afternoon, everyone, and again, welcome to Taming the Chaos. Ooh. We're going to talk a lot about what's next in software engineering. For context, again, as you heard, I'm a partner at a venture capital firm called Tapestry VC. Again, I'm sure many of you are thinking, what has the dark side done here and how have they infiltrated the ranks of many engineers here? I assure you, my team would tell you that I spend far too much time talking about and thinking about code, and so hopefully I'll be an okay counterpart to my panelists here. And yeah, maybe do some intros. Ron?
Yeah, definitely. Hey everybody, I'm Ron Ifrani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Phlox and also the president of the NixOS Foundation, one of the largest open source projects in the world today with over 10,000 active monthly contributors. So kind of on both sides of the world, commercial, open source, stuff like that. Excited to be here. And before this, I was leading developer products at a small firm called Meta. So.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Roxana Diaconescu. I'm the CTO of Silverrail, again, on the private side, but also contributing to Open Mobility Standard and supporting it, as well as I've worked in 30-something year in computer software, computer systems, both in academic research, open research, and companies like Cloudera, open source provider, and maintainer and enterprise provider, as well as Uber, Meta, and other companies.
Yeah, I'm Justin Cormack. I'm CTO at Docker, so also we have a big open source project and a big open source world. I've also been involved a lot in CNCF and the cloud native world that came out of that space. I kind of discovered open source as an engineer a long time ago, and it really kind of worked for me as a way of getting stuff done, and that's still what it does.
So I'm sure many of you know this, but how these panels typically work is we all gather together as panelists, we share our objectives, goals, etc., what we want to talk about. And we kind of landed on two objectives for this panel, at least, which is, on the one end, as the title says, we want to help you guys tame the chaos, and so share some, I guess, hard-earned lessons about the world of engineering, how we make it a little bit easier. But then simultaneously, I think we want to make your lives a little bit more difficult, which I will get to. And so maybe, Roxana, you listed off many of the credentials, which was part of my intro for you. So, but I at least know that Uber is responsible for being pretty early to the world of microservices. We chatted a bunch about cadence, and that became temporal on the durable workflow side. Is there anything across Uber, Meta, Cloudera, Sysdig as well, I think I saw? eBPF shop, that you think is still underrated from your times there in the world of engineering leadership, or teams that you think more teams should be doing, or projects that more teams should be using?
Underrated, I don't know, but I know what has been useful, and I think to me it's more about thinking. It's true, when I joined Uber, they were just moving from, had been painfully moving for about 2 years, part of a Darwin project, from a monolith to a set of microservices. By the time I left, there were 3,000 plus microservices and 3,000 engineers. So more than a service, I would say, not so micro per engineer. So that's a lot of chaos to tame right there. And it was a problem. And I think cadence was definitely talked about at that time, not widely adopted at Uber, as I remember. I think one thing that I guess myself and a lot of engineers look for when looking at complexity is how do you observability and unpacking the chaos via metrics and observability. So Jaeger was definitely one of the technologies which I was a big fan of while there. M3, their metrics tooling, again, commendable. Since then, I mean, every company reinvents a little bit the wheel, and the world is moving on, but those are open technologies that work with things like open telemetry, etc. So notable to my mind. Again, in the same realm, the same problem, Meta came up with this time series database, which we looked at intensely, called GorillaDB, a good inspiration for the problem at that time in memory database, super compact format. But not sure if it's widely used, or check it out if you have time series problems and how to store them. And I guess GraphQL, it's a very, very useful technology from Meta that I'm a big fan of, and it's proved useful for many, so the adoption is wild.
I think M3 became the company Chronosphere, if I
I don't know.
That's the venture capitalist in me, I'm sorry, everyone. I totally forgot that you ran DevTools, or at least led one of the teams within Meta, and so I'm sure you have some underrated projects, technologies too, and you're not allowed to say Llama, which I guess isn't underrated, or React, or any of the low-hanging fruit.
You didn't say PyTorch. No. So I think to that question, I think there's a bunch of projects. I think Facebook now has north of 600 like open source projects out there. One of the cool ones that I appreciated was like Docusaurus. I don't know if you checked it. It just talks about. I mean, it's more about what it means and why I think Facebook built it, and that's kind of more of an engineering principle, where it goes into the fact that like engineers, and I'm biased, obviously, I think we're all biased here in the front, engineers are the most valuable resource that a company has, and engineering time is the most valuable resource, and it's like, how do we set them up the most, like how do we set us up and engineers up for success, and how do we make them, have the lowest friction possible to make sure that they're able to do magic for ones and zeros. So for me, it's more about the principle behind it. I think at Facebook, it was very evident that that is a core item. Today, it might be a bit different. When I was back there, it was very obvious. And there was a lot of thought going into how do we make engineering lives better? And Docusaurus is kind of like an output of that, but a lot of it went into very thoughtful, like how do we even measure engineering so that we know what to maximize and optimize for, right? Like, and this went into a wide swath of different products that also included things like, right, backstage in the open source, we had our own IDP that we were developing, and the whole idea was like, what if we can serve developers up everything in just one place and they get everything they need? But I mean, the short answer for me is like, I think Docusaurus, but more because of what I saw internally, the reason for it.
I mean, yes, it's made my life a little easier, and then I guess the buzzword du jour that has made, again, my life easier is CodeGen, and whether it's Cursor or, pick your tool. One of our portfolio companies recently shared that they now have, I think it's a 20% acceptance rate on suggestions from Cursor. I can safely say that I'm probably in the vibe coder category, which maybe you've seen Andre Karpathy hint to, i.e. I probably accept about 90% of the suggestions as a kind of a solo dev here.
I mean, I'm curious from the crowd, like how many of you are using like Copilot-esque tools versus like full, like things like Devin and stuff like that?
Probable, yeah.
So like, yeah, like Copilot-esque tools, ChatGPT and all that, is that everyone? I'm assuming it's going to be everyone? Seeing general nodding.
We got any Cursor in the audience? No
Cursor. Wow.
Wow. Okay.
Just.
I mean, here.
So for those watching us, no one in the audience is using. What about like Devin, like full automation tools? No, right? Not cool. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we are already making your lives more difficult and not easier. There's no taming here. Justin, for you maybe as a Cursor user, and I think perhaps people in your team and org as well. How do you ensure with these tools that they still adhere to the coding standards, the security standards that you've obviously developed at Docker over many years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that right now, all the code is still going through a lot of the same kind of review processes. And like, I think that a lot of the kind of software lifecycle hasn't yet changed. I think that, because I think that these things are still early, but I think that, thinking about a whole AI-driven life cycle where you're starting from more specifications like this is the relevant set of things that you need to know for generating this bit of code. These are the kind of this is how we do logging at Docker. Don't try and invent something else. And I think that there's a lot of. I think you have to be quite explicit about that, and you clearly need tools so that you're not having to be explicit about it by hand every time. But like, I remember talking a while ago to some people about like, well, if you just look at people's code bases, you tend to copy the bad bits and the good bits and the things they didn't want to do. It really helps to kind of distill out like, this is how we do things, like writing things up. They're the things that like senior engineers do, sometimes, always, like writing down, this is how we do things, and then feeding that into the AI as part of your process really helps.
So you bake those principles into the prompt or the system prompt, or like?
I think that at the moment it's a bit hit and miss, but I think that they will be baked into the prompts, into the repos. Like, I think that everything is going to, all those things are going to move out of the weird places they are into code repos where they're accessible to AI.
And then, DeepSeek has come along lately, and I've seen it mentioned a bunch during this conference. How do you evaluate a new model? And Roxana, this might come to you too, or Ron. How do you think about, picking up something like DeepSeek or picking up another new model? Is there a set of evals, evaluations, or what's kind of the thought process behind a new model being released and your team responding accordingly?
I guess when even we asked, can we use code assist, and we had to go to our data security and what's our AI policy, right? Like, even if I want to, I have to be very, very careful what I put out there. So that's a problem. A small problem, but it's a slight problem. And then I get my husband to say that, oh, I downloaded this, which turned out to be this DeepSeek on his computer. I was like, oh, really? His personal computer, not his work computer. But I think we need a framework to be able to do that. So I don't think that I would download it at work, but I would definitely play with it in my own time. So, yeah. I don't know what.
I think there's a general item. I don't know how folks here in the room are kind of addressing this, but it's like new models are coming out very often. And it seems like, there's a lot of incentive from the companies building out the model to marketeer and position it in a certain way that they're trying to compel us to go and use that model. So I think to your question about how do you evaluate new models that come in, I honestly don't think there's a benchmark today at all, right? I don't know even how we
I think it's all vibes bench. Just kind of, does it feel good at the moment for a lot of people? But I think that, like, as we learn to use AI, we will have to build our own kind of frameworks. I think that, internally we have stuff for. We have things that we can test and benchmark for specific test cases, but like for knowledge work, I think a lot of it is about people are going to have to do their own evals for their own kind of work, and understand if I went back to that problem I tried a year ago, would this have been better or worse and things like that? And you're going to have to really kind of spend some time doing that kind of work yourself for your own way of working or your own team's way of working.
I saw a great post over the weekend by a UK company, actually, Incident.io, if anyone is familiar with the guys. And it was a great post basically outlining that they were upgrading to the latest O4 model. So they had 100% accuracy with the old open AI model. They wanted to upgrade to the new model, and on this core prompt that they were testing, evaluating this new model with, it went from 100% accuracy to something like, I was telling you guys earlier, I think 75% or something like that. So diminished by quite a bit. Interestingly, Sonnet, Claude's model, Anthropic's model, was hitting a 95% accuracy mark with that new core prompt. And what I find fascinating is that's an entirely different model family, entirely different company. And yet just upgrading to this one new iteration of the same model family can have that kind of impact on a core prompt. I don't know how we get any sort of conviction around these models.
Yeah, I think that, whenever it was, in the middle of last year, everyone I know moved to Sonnet. It was just there was the whisper went around the room that Sonnet was great for coding, and that was suddenly the world was different, and everyone moved onto it. And I think there's a lot of that kind of word of mouth kind of thing. I think the number of people doing formal evals versus word of mouth vibes, look and feel.
The fact that vibes has been mentioned 3 times in this already makes me.
Just to call it out, the way I feel about it is that I feel that right now the industry of utilizing AI or trying to leverage AI is somewhat of a micro competitive edge. If there's a company out there that is able to leverage AI in a more optimized fashion, then they're able to move faster. They're maybe able to use less resources or reach a breaking point, a positive breaking point, in terms of the research that they're doing faster than we are. So like for me, it's felt like I have to force myself about every 45 days to set a reminder and kind of switch things around to try like a different model, a different system or something like that. And very much on the vibe check, I like run about half a day's worth of work through that model to see where it ends up being. And if it's like good enough and passes that check, then continue on.
I mean, I think there's a huge difference if you watch people, you know, who have built up ways of doing things with AI versus people who are kind of just not really kind of built their own workflows and ways of doing things at the moment. And a lot of the communication is either people talking to each other or people watching YouTube streams and trying to understand like how other people are using this stuff. Like we don't have an education system for AI yet. We don't have well understood ways of doing things. It's all weird. Like so when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro. You know, it's like.
I do feel that we are getting on the level of confusion rather than taming the cow. So add that into the variable and the entropy of any complex system at that level, where especially if there is no readiness for data foundations, for example, and you know, how do you apply your model? How do they feed them your own data in a sensible way? So I think we're on the edge of reversing the taming the cows into confusion. But yeah, certainly there'll be more confusion in the years to come.
I mean, just last week I spoke to CIO of, you know, call it a Fortune 100 company, and asked him just how is he managing the artifacts associated with these models right now? Because I guess just like software 1.0, we have data sets, we have, I guess, pickle files, safe tensors, whatever you want to use, and then you have the underlying open source model. These are artifacts that go into this new form of software. And his answer was just like, we're not. There is no management. My mind went to, I guess, something like Hugging Face. I don't use it for enterprise purposes, but I'm just curious around the team as you think about, again, these new artifacts. Is it a artifact manager? Is it Artifactory? Is it Cloudsmith? Is it Docker? What's actually being used to manage these artifacts?
I think, as you say, people are like, oh, suddenly there's some more things and there's some more repositories and there's some more thing that we're not. I mean, again, I think you're right. At the moment, most people are not managing them. I think there was a big. I think there was a bunch of like Python pickling security vulnerability stuff, which has mostly actually been kind of gone away because people realized that was a terrible idea. But to even like have AI models, which are a bunch of numbers, also be able to execute code as you kind of downloaded them. But generally, I think that that stuff's all kind of up for grabs. I think we have a lot of people asking us about like, yes, we want OCI containers and normal registries for AI models because we don't want another thing. But I think that like whenever some new ecosystem comes up, this it's always the case. There's always a new set of repositories, new things, new and like people are just asking like, what is in that gigabyte of stuff I downloaded? Like, can I, where's my security scanner? What do I need to know about this? Like all the standard questions are still entirely applicable.
Roxana, anything?
Yeah, I was going to say that, when there are a lot more questions to even be asked before we even have the answers, right? Like, so we talked a little bit about, like, there is a lot of talk about agents, and then you're thinking, oh, so let me unpack this. Well, like, let's say my company wants to build an agent. What do I need? What do I need? Well, I need to have an API that's agent ready, whatever, standard, machine readable, documented, etc. But then, oh, wait a minute, how do I register? How do I publish this agent? Am I liable if my agent misbehaves? How do I advertise its services? How do I make it able to talk to other agents? So there are so many services that are actually untalked about. Like, how do you actually get to do that? So a lot more gaps I see in the discourse. Of we're going to do this. We need to kind of unpack it and think, like, what does it mean and what are we missing here? And I think we miss, including a code of conduct of my agent. Like, here's what I know what to do, here's what good means to me and what bad means to me. Here was I'm allowed to talk to these other agents, but not with these other agents. security implications and all other stuff, so I think a lot more question than answers at the moment in the space.
But I mean, conversely, we've had a lot of good success with just like telling AI to read the man page, execute the command in the container. Like the docs we wrote for people are great for AI. Like you don't necessarily need to build a new way of doing something. You just like we literally have prompts that just say, if you get stuck, read them. If it doesn't work, read the man page, and that's all you need. That's all you need to get the AI.
With reasoning or improved reasoning, that's just getting easier and easier, right? There was that demand for structured outputs, but I think less so now. I mean, the other thing that has made my life a lot easier, and I'm looking at you, Ron, is Flux for ultimately working with LLMs, at least at a local level. And then I know the team had worked on a project called Flame. I think I saw you just release something today about running DeepSeek locally too, and a whole UI for doing that with your friends at Vercel. What can you share more about Flux or Flame? And yeah.
Yeah, I think so. We've been without going too deep on like what Flox aims to do, but like we've been looking at the entire AI space similarly to how we've been looking at general development space, which is how can we simplify it to just the base level, and enable anyone and everyone to be able to deploy it fully locally, meaning anywhere, right? Because if you can do it on Metal, you can do it in the cloud, you can do it in a container. And that's why we have this like little side project where you can actually jump around with environments and set up like DeepSeek with one line, right? So it's like Flux activate DeepSeek, and then it's with a lot of that is in partnership with good friends at like Olama and Vercel, like some other areas, but you can actually run the full thing through it.
And because you are captive panelists, and I can kind of just ask you whatever questions I like. Sorry, Justin and Ron. What's the dynamic between, I guess, Flux and containers? Do you play nicely together? Is there healthy tension in this panel right now?
No. I mean, we've known each other for a long time. But I think that when we've done a lot of work together on containers plus Nix, and I think that I think there's a lot of different use cases and different ways of doing things, ways of putting things together, and it's kind of you can build containers with Nix very easily, and it's a good reproducible way. AI is very good at building things with Nix. It's good at using Nix expressions to do things, which is kind of fun. But people have different kind of use cases and things they need to do and ways they want to think about problems. And so there's a lot of choice in this space. I think that there's a lot of different use cases of containers throughout the whole kind of life cycle, and a lot of the kind of philosophy of reproducibility is a common thought across a lot of what we do. Is like, what kind of reproducibility do you mean? How do you reproduce things? Like, what do you need to be able to do? Like, over what time scale? What kind of constraints have you got? And I think there's been a lot of people pushing towards more understandability, reproducibility, and those things that have pushed both Docker and Nix, and and there are reasons why people have moved towards those technologies over kind of the old YOLO technologies of just log into the server and update things.
I would say it's best of both worlds. I would say this drives like one of my hard opinions in the future of software engineering, obviously, as a biased person on this subject, but it's like my view to it is the more we can simplify what developers need to care about, that is not purely turning again ones and zeros into magic. Whatever you're working on, the better we are. So a lot of the way I think about containers, the way I think about Docker, the way I think about Flux and Nix is what else can we put in there that can abstract that away, right? Why do we need to care what environments we're running on? Why do we need to care which OS we're going to be deploying on if I'm on a Mac and Justin's on a whatever Linux box? Can't we just be agnostic to all of that, right? Can't we just define something once and then be able to ship it anywhere, be able to containerize it, and then continue with our container and Docker workflows? Like, I think that's a big part of hopefully where we're going, is we're starting to minimize that, whether through AI, whether through like infrastructure technologies like Nix and Docker. Like that's how I think about it.
This is far too diplomatic of an answer from the two of you, and I was really hoping for a bit of blood.
We've practiced.
So maybe to switch tact, and something that keeps me up, at least at night, is the world of security and how LLMs impacts that. And really, if you look at it, there's about 250K CVEs that have ever been reported, but there's, millions, tens of millions of files of open source software. And now we have these incredible search tools where you can give them a bunch of prompts, a few examples, and they can go and search for other examples, other exploits within code bases. And so, it kind of terrifies me, to be honest. Are you fighting back with LLMs from a security perspective? I know, Justin, you had done a lot of security work at Docker prior to helming.
I mean, I think that, security is always an arms race, and like both sides will use new technologies, and that's always the case. I think that, I think that it's hard to see which way the arms race will go. It's also like, I think that, I think the attackers always have advantages. So there's always, it's always a little bit loaded on that side, but
they only need to be right once.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of attack surface. But on the other hand, like a lot of the issue on the defense side is, understandability and the, being able to, the kind of the amount of data that you have is big because your infrastructure is big and there's a lot going on, and tooling that can help you with that is really valuable because you can actually really understand and see things that are big and complex, and so it really is a data problem, and AI and other tooling that's about data is really valuable from that point of view. And being able to treat more things with code. I mean, I think one of the ways you can look at AI is like suddenly software is applicable to a whole load of things it wasn't applicable to before, like writing and code and config file, things like that you didn't really have the ability to address with code before. And the more you expand what's code, the more you can do with code, and we know how to scale that, and we know how to work with that. So that's kind of another advantage. But it could go either way. And
I totally agree. And again, jury's out if we actually helped any of you tame the chaos. You can let us know post. But I also promise to make your lives a little bit more difficult. And so maybe just a quick question for all of you, and then I'd love to hear a few questions. Is there one open source project, piece of technology that people should leave this talk from and then pick it up this evening, let you know if they liked it, if they loved it or not? Maybe Ron, you want to jump in first?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm super hyper biased. So, I mean, the one technology that I think for me is shaping a lot of the software principles that I think are going to be shaping the next 10 years, obviously, as a biased person, is definitely Nix, nixos.org. That's the open source project I was talking about originally. I think just to give a preemption to what I think Nix is, because it's a lot of things for a lot of different people. It's like hundreds of thousands of engineers are now using it across about 1,500 different companies, from Google to startups to obviously Flux. And I think Nix comes 20-something years ago, and Nix comes and says, hey, software is complex today, and it's only going to continue getting complex, right? It's going to continue getting complex from two sides, right? And the software engineer sits in the middle. It's from the left, it's like repositories and open source dependencies and different languages, and our repos getting bigger and wider. And That's requiring us to do a lot more in order to just set up, in order to be able to build and run code. On the right, it's like what the market wants that code to do, what we want that code to do, right? 20 years ago, we were asking code to create like initial mobile apps. I don't know if I'm right on my timeline, but now we're asking code to write code and like analyze code, and it's like there's a huge growth there. So I think Nix comes from that approach that software is just going to get incrementally and exponentially more complex. Can we look at software with that in mind, right? And therefore, it comes in with a few principles. I'm not going to go too deep into it, where everything is one format and one architecture type, so it starts simplifying the scope that we have to deal with. So obviously, very much recommend checking it out, and we always need more contributors. So.
Yeah, so I'm not particularly religious about any technologies at the moment, but I can say what I'm thinking about and what are the problems I see other people wanting to solve, like Docker and Kubernetes became a religion to some extent, if you agree, but because people were trying to solve for breaking down the monolith, right? So I think people go and solve that problem once inside the company, whether it's Meta, whether it's Google, and then somebody else solves it again, and by the third or fourth iteration, you kind of see a technology that sticks, and that's what I see with Kubernetes and Docker, for example. But if today I'm looking at what we are trying to solve for and what people are grappling with in the chaos, I would say observability, so open telemetry is something that I'm keen on, and we're adopting and we're using. So definitely, in terms of data and data infrastructure, I think that's a big problem, especially that we're talking about all this AI model, and there is no foundational structure how to ingest that, how to combine that, how to structure that. So open metadata is another technology that came out of Uber, and actually I was working with the inventor of it, and who was also the founder of Hortonworks while at Uber. So I think it's a very cool technology, not cool, but useful for if you are worried about how do you catalog your data, discover, know where it comes from, what schema and whatever, how is it structured, so that you can do the other stuff in a more useful way. Yeah, so these are the things that data lakes, like Hoodie is another open source project that it's super interesting, and if you want to do AI, probably you need one of those. And so there is an open source. Uber went through 4 or 5 iterations before, and it still remains the only and probably most published technology about. So it's those are the things that I would I'm thinking about these days, and if others are thinking about them, go and check them out.
Yeah, I mean, actually, you two have mentioned quite a few things I'm interested. I'm very much interested in the whole data lake. That area. Everyone knows I'm obsessed by object storage and like being able to really cheaply build data stores for all kinds of data. I think that because data got very siloed in various places, and then it got very siloed in kind of Snowflake and places, and now there's having data that you can read from anywhere, write from anywhere, single storage that you have control over is really important. Where we're trying to do a lot more with data. Data is really incredibly important for everything we're doing. It's the basis of how you're going to build everything. So I'm kind of obsessed by that. I think that there's a huge area around open source AI tooling for developers building their own tools, and there's a whole bunch of things that are really early and really interesting where people are build tools for how you want to work and see if other people come along. I think a lot of people, Ada is quite popular, but there's we're starting finally to see the kind of growth in that sort of area. There's I came from Magenta for NeoVim yesterday, which is people are building tools for the way they want to work, and that's really important because it's been really weird watching this sort of AI developer tooling environment where we started by taking commercial tools rather than started by building open source tools and working out how we want to work. And I think we're going to see that reverse, and the open source tools are going to be where the innovation is for quite a while. And I think that's really going to be a really exciting area.
Well, you've all left me with work to do at the very least, and hopefully, everyone else here. Maybe we go to the audience for some questions. These better be really good questions, guys.
Stephen, we're asking for questions. You can ask a question.
I mean, I can throw some back at the ground, see if we can start a discussion on this. Like, what's the most concerning thing you have in your mind with just AI moving at the pace that it's moving? You know, do you feel like you're keeping up? Is there any worries that are showing up from it? I'm curious. Yeah, Mike?
So, you know, we need to figure out how we authorize AI to act on our behalf. Because if we don't, then we literally get to the Terminator. Like, I want the AI to be able to book my airline tickets. So I need to be able to say, like, what are the parameters on which the AI could act? But if we don't set those parameters properly, maybe the AI decides that, you know, to solve global warming, it just has to eliminate all the humans. So literally, if we can't get the authorization rules right, then it's hard. It's kind of hard to make this transition.
I'll admit I was wondering if someone's going to ask about job security, but I guess, you know, the T800 was like probably the next up.
But yeah, and I think that one's really interesting because I think that like the authorization problem is weird and complicated because you know, you want to give parameters, you want to but like you do want it to do a lot of things that are high privilege for you, and we've not been very good at understanding how we authorize programs to do stuff on our behalf anyway, because when you kind of click on a browser, you don't think about the authorization because it's kind of it feels very direct, you're doing it, but you know, there's actually a load of software in between you and the thing happening. And you know, the more indirect it gets, the kind of weirder it gets, and the more things can go wrong, and the more like tools can rack up bills for you and those types of things, and and the more questions you have to ask when you know your organization discovers that you're just giving access to all these tools to various things, and it's not you doing, you know, the kind of whole security model of like a user is using a computer, it goes away if like the user just delegates it all to some code that they don't control, because then they're like, oh, well, has it audit the code and like see what it could do and things like that, which becomes really difficult. So I think there's a lot of work to do there. I think it's going to be a really interesting.
And I think I'm gonna also take that question to a wider lens and like also attach it to how I'm thinking about just software engineering in general, where I think AI is kind of taking us on this course of moving from contributors to orchestrators, right? And I think this also has to do with like, do we need software engineers in 10 years? It's like, yes, we do. I just think that the role is going to start transforming, and it's going to be from us like being the ones who are, you know, kind of doing the work itself to us being like the conductor of the train where like a bunch of agents are following us. And things like authorization is going to come into effect where we're, you know, what do we allow these agents to do and what do we trust them to do? And then even if we trust them to do that, what do we test? What do we validate? Because I think that's still going to be the human in the loop.
I mean, to scale, it can't. Initially, it can be the human in the loop, but to scale it comes back to how do you publish it. You really, there is a gap there, so those questions are not answered. But it's a great question, like how do you publish your agent? How do you authorize it to do some stuff on your behalf? And even who's liable if it gets it wrong? Is it you because it represents you? So yeah, I do think there is a big gap there to be solved. But I'm no doubt, you know, it's just a matter of getting to work and solving it.
Does anyone else have an open source project or otherwise that we should all go home and play around with this evening? Anyone want to shout out anything cool? Wow, at an open source conference, no one's got any open source to share.
I guess I've not got an open source project, but just a question or question about what our concerns are, maybe around. I think. Working for a consultancy, I guess I worry a little bit about the guardrails we give our engineers for using these tools. So you kind of mentioned what tools, what version of a tool people are using, they're changing every 45 days. It was kind of what you said, how you looked at it. So yeah, how does a consultancy keep up with the guardrails to give the team access to those tools, leverage those tools, but kind of do it safely, securely along the way? So yeah, I guess that's what's on my mind.
So I think it's really a lot about understanding the implications. So I think if people understand more about how these things work and whether they share their data within their company, outside their company, and what are the implications, I think it starts with the understanding. Then you can build some frameworks around it. You don't want to impede innovation. You don't want to tell people, don't play with that. I actually want to tell my engineers to go and play with that. But I also want to be careful and understand the implication and have a framework around that and kind of help them with that. But you're right to say that we don't have strong frameworks, and therefore they're probably more restrictive than they should be these days because we just don't understand very well.
I think we're in the second golden age of shadow IT. Like shadow AI is big. Like I was really told off back in the day for paying for my own Amazon S3 bucket back in 10 years, no more than 10 years ago now, because like the company process for getting an Amazon S3 bucket was really annoying, and I just got my own and used it because we needed one. And I think we're back to that kind of thing where people are definitely using AI tools that they are not allowed to use with company data all the time right now. And we haven't seen that much shadow IT for a long time.
You know what, on that point, I'll just say one last thing. I think this goes back to a first principle that I have, right, where we hire folks that we trust, and then they build up that trust. So at the end of the day, right, there's only so much control that we can put in there, and there's more on, as long as that person understands their realm of accountability and what they need to deliver, like I feel I should trust them to be able to exercise that mindset as they're kind of exploring tools that can make them more productive, reach their goals much faster, but also at the end of the day, they're still accountable if it fails, if it's successful, whatever it is. So I think that's kind of, to your point about shadow IT and control there.
Yeah. Do you want one last statement maybe? I think we need to...
We got one more question.
Okay, if we could answer it real quick, because then we need to get Stephen up.
As people working in technology, we always have to keep up with what's happening, but it feels personally to me that things are quite fast right now. And, I'm come to this conference, I hear about so many new tools, so many new AI, so much, and it's like, how do you personally manage to balance the keeping up, but at the same time do your day-to-day job at some point,
If you're a venture capitalist, your job is to keep up with these things, and so it's very convenient. So
That's why I'm friends with Alex. He sends me newsletters and it reminds me that there's a world outside of what I'm working on. No, I would say, again, it goes back to what I said. I do feel I have to force myself. I do feel that. And I do feel I have to kind of like build this regimen where I'm like, okay, it's been 40 days since I've left my cave. Let's leave my cave, look outside and be like, yep, not for me, and go back in. But like sometimes I do stumble across like a holy crap moment where I'm like, yeah, this is actually going to make me much more successful, my team much more successful. But yeah, I don't have a full-on solution for that yet.
I mean, I think, find a community that will help you find some interesting things. I think that's really, a lot of it's word of mouth, recommendations, like seeing what other people are doing. You can't try and understand everything yourself because it's hard to understand something in detail to use it. But if you see someone else using it, and then you can understand their use case, and that really helps. So find a friendly community you can learn from.
I mean, I would just say, repeat what everybody else says, just be intentional about it. I really actually have to make time and take time of my week, whatever. I have a structure for everything. I have a framework for everything. So I have a framework for reading about what's out there. I also try to be fairly strategic about it. Like, what's the problem that consumes me, and what's the state of what's going on out there that can help me. So it kind of, it combines my day-to-day with keeping up,
Okay. I think we are going to have to leave it there, folks. Thanks. This is super interesting. These guys will be around in the corridor if you want to hassle them more, but we need to get Stephen up. Thank you.
thanks, everyone.